Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. Mike Haltman, the host of the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. And in the intro, it talks about having impressive guests. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes that is not true. But today, it certainly is true. Today, we are grateful to have with us Cathy Cunningham. She is the commercial real estate finance, and actually, you're a co-deputy editor.
That's correct. Yes.
Of one of the gold standards of the commercial real estate industry, the Commercial Observer. So, Cathy, thank you very much for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Mike, thanks so much for having me. It's so great to see you, and thank you for having me today.
No, it's my pleasure. So, actually, Cathy and I were supposed to talk a couple of days ago, but she was kind of sidetracked, but for a good reason. She's involved with the Multiple Sclerosis Society, which is actually a charity that's near to my heart. I have my mother suffered with multiple sclerosis until she passed, and it's another one of those diseases that needs to find a cure. And I think Cathy mentioned that she did a fundraiser and they raised about $600,000, which is phenomenal. So congratulations and kudos on your philanthropic. Your journey, your philanthropic journey.
Thanks so much, Mike. And like you said, it was a terrific event. Belmont Racetrack, a big real estate presence there. So a lot of the construction community came out because it's really kind of headlined by Jim Donaghy from STO. So a big construction crowd, big real estate crowd, and just raising that amount of money was fantastic. Every dollar is obviously kept towards a cure. But it's also just a great day also. Such energy in that room, and everybody kind of going in the same direction to try and find a cure for MS. So it was terrific.
It's phenomenal. And if you have it on the top of your head, what's the URL if somebody wanted to donate?
I don't have it top of my head, but it's called the NMSS, so the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. So if you look there, the color of the website is orange. If you look there, you'll see that's the best way to identify it. And you'll see various ways to donate that way.
You know what? It's interesting. I had somebody donated to my charity, or thought they were, and they had actually donated to a different charity. So you have to make sure it's the right orange charity.
That's correct. That's correct.
So I did notice that Cathy has a slight accent, and I do know.
Just a little one.
Yes, yeah. She went to in Scotland. And actually, that's one of my goals is to get to Scotland and play the Old Course.
So I'm actually from a small village in Scotland that's about 15 minutes from the Old Course.
Really?
So I grew up really, really close to it. Actually, my mom really wanted me to go to St Andrews University, so it'd be closer to home. But when you're a teenager, you want to go as far away as possible. So I went to Glasgow instead. But it's a beautiful town. I hope you get there someday. It's a really gorgeous town.
Yeah, no, it's spectacular. It's spectacular. Yeah. So what brought you out of Scotland and brought you to New York City and put you into the commercial real estate finance space?
It all kind of happened a little bit by accident. I really wanted to be a journalist from as long as I can remember. I wanted to be a journalist, actually. And then when I was a teenager, I had this kind of dream of being a journalist in New York City. To me, that was the ultimate place to be a journalist, especially a business journalist eventually. And so I kind of slowly made my path there via going to university in Glasgow and then applying for every single internship that would bring me to New York as a journalist. So it wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy. And just the way that things came back was every single interview I had was for business journalism or finance, which I really knew nothing about at the time. In Scotland, I was writing for a local newspaper, covering politics, covering just, day-to-day restaurants, things like that. But every interview I had was about finance, about, CMBS, about, mortgages, about everything else. So lucky for me, one of the interviews, an editor said, what do you know about for example, Goldman Sachs about bonds. And I was very honest and said, look, I know nothing, but I'm a quick learner. If you take a chance on me, bring me over and I promise I won't let you down. And that was 2005. So I've since been here, 18 years
Wow.
and just, worked my socks off. Obviously from Scotland, you had a visa, so to be sponsored, everything else. So very, very hard work was involved, but made it happen. And when I started covering real estate and finance, I found out that I loved it. And people were so kind, helping me learn about the industry, helping me learn about the topics that I was covering, which at some point were really, really difficult. But here I am, 18 years later. So
That's a phenomenal journey because you came over here by yourself.
all by myself. Didn't know one soul in New York City. So my mother was terrified, but
Or on some level, a little bit terrified too.
yes, I was. And I think, at that point, I was obviously a lot younger. I won't say how much younger, but I think you also have extra bravery when you're a little bit younger, less fear about what could possibly happen. So I think that probably works in my favor too, a little bit.
That's fantastic. And you ended up at Commercial Observer, which is unbelievable.
Yes. Absolutely. So I actually started out at institutional investor in Euromoney back in 2005. And a lot of my same, first of all, sources are remained with me since that time. Now are working with me at Commercial Observer, but also some of my colleagues are now Commercial Observer. So it's kind of come full circle in terms of, that journey. But yeah, now I'm a Commercial Observer. And I've been there for 7 years now.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And
And
time flies.
you've moved up quite a bit.
I have, yeah.
But
Yeah,
you
I
said
really have.
something early on. You said you worked your socks off, and I respect that because
Yes.
it seems that working your socks off is kind of a lost art in
Yeah.
in today's society. I could be wrong, but when I got out of business school in a long time ago, I worked as a bond analyst on Wall Street,
So
and you had to work your ass off, and you had to pay your dues, and you had to play politics, and you had to really try and work it.
right.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's great.
It's really hard. I think it's something that can't be taught. Also, you really have to have that drive and
Yep.
that kind of, quest for excellence, that quest to be the best at what you do. And I think it's something that really can't be taught. You have to have that fire in your belly, so to speak, So
Absolutely. So,
yeah. Yeah.
oh no, go.
I was just going to say, if I didn't have it, I don't think I'd be here today, because it was very competitive. And, when I first came over here, I was really covering the boom of the market, both CMBS and RMBS, so commercial and residential. And then obviously with global financial crisis, everything kind of fell apart again. So it was really a roller coaster ride for me as a journalist trying to cover that as a very young age.
Well,
And if you think about all the lawsuits and everything was involved too, so it was a heady time, it was crazy.
well, speaking of the financial crisis, so prior to owning a title company, I owned a commercial mortgage lending company.
Oh, interesting.
We sold our paper to the CMBS market, and 2008 was a very difficult time. I mean, my company was no longer viable, and I had two girls in college. I had a third kid on his way to college, and I had to reinvent very quickly. But
Absolutely. I
I'm
bet you learned some good lessons from that, right? You probably learned some great lessons from that time.
You know what I learned, and it's interesting. What I learned was that I could persevere. I think there's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and it's where your flight or fight
Right.
mechanism is. And I always think it would have been very easy to curl up into a ball, but you know, that's not who I am. So we fought, but
Yeah,
I definitely know that that was a roller coaster time. Absolutely,
absolutely. Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think also that kind of fight, not flight attitude is also a very New York attitude, right? So I think that's also something that I saw a lot of during the global financial crisis as a journalist.
Sometimes that fight instead of fleeing can be a problem in New York City because
Correct.
the opportunity for conflict is always around us.
That's true. This is very true.
Very much. So CMBS, and I was going to talk to you about this, a little bit later, but since you brought it up, do you view the refinance landslide that we're going to be running into? And I know that there've been buildings already that where the keys were just handed back, but do you see another CMBS crisis?
I don't know if I see a CMBS crisis as much as I do just a refinancing crisis, which I think has been, talked about a lot, Mike, in terms of this 1.5 trillion maturity wall that's headed our way. And I think the brunt of the pain obviously is going to be felt by Class B office owners. I think they're the ones that are least likely to get financing today. And I think for these owners, it's not just about the refinance, which is going to be difficult enough. But when this refinance is due, if they can get refinancing they're going to have a hard time because a lot of lenders are either not in the market or being very cautious about where they lend, they're going to have to probably put cash in at this refinance.
Yep.
So, obviously, I think a lot of these owners in the past have been lucky enough to take cash out, but instead it's going to be cash in. And they also have to, they also have, they have to think about TI expenses, they have to think about CapEx. So there's a big, need for capital in these buildings. And there's just so much pressure in terms of, first of all, getting this refinance and all the capital concerns that go along with it. So for us, that's the main, what we're hearing is as a publication, that's what we're mainly hearing about. I think other asset classes are, more insulated to a certain extent, but it's certainly not, getting off scot-free, pun intended. I think multifamily is doing better for the most part, but there's still some cracks there. And I think we're hearing a lot about, hospitality today is also doing pretty well, just, given, I think, the surge in travel and what have you. So assets like that might be better positioned for this maturity wall. But when it comes to office, and especially Class B office, I think there's going to be some pain there, unfortunately.
So, I know that there are a lot of loans that are non-recourse, although there are a lot of loans that are recourse.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
what is going to happen to, I know banks don't want to put bad debt on their books. They,
Sure.
they may be more accommodating in situations where maybe they shouldn't be to try and get the ball over the finish line. But, how do you view how is that going to impact the lenders?
In terms of the refinances, I think there's a lot more scrutiny on banks again, especially regional banks, just given what we've seen. You and I talked about Signature Bank, I think, which has left a big gaping hole in New York real estate lending landscape. But I think there's far more pressure on regional banks to look at how they're lending and the refinances they're considering or pursuing. But I think even more broadly than that, I think a lot of lenders, whether they're regional banks or money center banks or alternative non-bank lenders, are really having to scrutinize one by one every single opportunity that comes their way, because there's just so much uncertainty just now still. I think instead of in terms of interest rates, there was a lot of just now they're paused, but I think at the end of that phone call with Jay Powell, he also kind of gave the indication that we're not done yet. There could be more to come depending on how inflation kind of plays out. So I think for that reason, and just given the overall uncertainty in the market, I think lenders being very, very careful. First of all, about how regulators might come down on them, how they're looking at their books, how they're looking at their own portfolio, and also just how some of these loans might play out. I think nobody obviously expected a lot of what we've been through the past few years to happen, and I think as a result, a lot of lenders just being very, very careful about how they deploy capital today.
Well, I have a friend who's he's a salesman. He's a commercial mortgage originator. And,
Okay.
he's telling me that the underwriters at his bank are afraid of their own shadow. And the bottom line is you don't get in trouble if you say no, but you do
Right.
get in trouble if you say yes and it becomes a problem.
Oh
But,
yeah.
I know one of the keys. So, back when I had my company, and as you said, not every lender lends on every scenario. Not every lender has the same parameters. Uh,
Sure.
now I have another friend who's a commercial mortgage broker, and he has 50 banks that he works with. He knows who lends, he knows who doesn't. Do you think it behooves the average borrower because in the old days, 10 years ago, if you could go to your corner bank, you probably weren't going to be getting the best deal, but you'd be getting a deal. Now that corner bank is probably not in the market,
Yep.
and the borrowers are at a loss. They don't know what to do. So, do you think the commercial mortgage broker is more of the methodology people should use?
I mean, obviously there's fees involved in brokerage, but I do think it's pretty smart in terms of just how quickly the lending landscape is changing today. We're hearing a lot about deals that have, the interest of lenders one day, and then within a few weeks that lender's backed out because maybe their credit committee doesn't like it, or maybe they're just saying, you know what, we have too much of this asset class in our portfolio, let's not pursue this. And a lot of borrowers are left high and dry at the 11th hour. So I think, we're the brokers, a lot of my best sources are brokers because they have such real-time information. And I think that same kind of benefit could really help borrowers because these guys are on the phone, or girls are on the phone all day long, just kind of, speaking with lenders, speaking with financing sources, saying, what's your appetite for XYZ? What kind of deals do you do? And so they really have the ability, I think, to put together, a lender, whether it's a capital stack, full capital stack, or just a senior lender or whatever for a deal. So from that perspective, I think brokers are super valuable. And I think people are also leaning on them pretty heavily right now as advisors. If they have a problem coming up, say like they need a loan extension, loan modification, what have you, I think that's something that brokers can definitely also help with. Right. So yeah, brokers I think are people to know in this environment.
100%. And typically they charge about a point to get
right.
it done.
Yeah.
And if you're shopping 50 banks,
right,
probably that point is going to be less expensive than whatever loan it was that you were going to take. So right. Everything's a business decision.
Everything is. But the other thing I'll say is, and this thing, I think our industry is a very relationship focused business. So I think if you can speak directly to your lender, if you have a problem, I think that's great. But I think also these brokers that, their industry and do terrifically well, I think they have these key relationships that they can really get very honest, very candid opinions from these lenders. Yep. And say, is this a yes or is it a no? Just tell me.
Oh, that's interesting because I know, back when I was doing commercial mortgages, the story was two people could bring the same deal to an underwriter and one would get a yes and one would get a no because one had a good reputation as a broker and right. could tell that, everything's a story. You have to be able to Absolutely. Tell the story.
Absolutely. And, if you think about these lenders too, if they don't know the borrower, which I think, if there's not a pre-standing kind of relationship, if a lender doesn't know a borrower, they want somebody to vouch for that borrower, right? In terms of this yep. person is somebody that you can trust. They're being very forthright about their portfolio or what have you. So I think it kind of works both ways in terms of that relationship, which is key.
I agree, and the key word there is relationship. No matter, right. You know what. In my business and yours too, you have to be out there, you have to be networking, you have to be meeting people. Like if you're sitting behind your desk, you're really not growing as best as you can. So at this stage of your career, are you still out there networking, growing your Rolodex, which you don't even know what that is, but
no, I do. No, absolutely. Honestly, it's my favorite thing. The people are my favorite part of this industry. So today I'm actually in Seattle, but last week I was in New York. And for 3 days I took my recruiters out with me. We just went from place to place, meeting to meeting. And just sitting with people, hearing what they're seeing, hearing what's interesting to them, what they're worried about in the market, any deals are kind of coming up, but you really kind of replicate that kind of just information exchange in terms of sitting across the table from somebody and just hearing what they're working on, what they're seeing firsthand. And you get a completely different flow of information, I think, on the phone or on a Zoom or anything else, just because it's just different. I think people love people and people like to sit across from somebody and just chat, which is invaluable.
So I run a networking group, and one of my lines always is that networking is a contact sport because Zoom and COVID, it was convenient, but
sure. Yeah.
I mean, the only reason I know you're not looking down reading your emails is because it's just you and me. But when you're in
right.
when you're in a networking group and there are 25 people, it's hard to gain somebody's attention. So
definitely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I think during the pandemic, Zoom was so valuable and we would have been lost without it, right? I think it would have, I think our industry would look very, very different if we couldn't have Zoom meetings. But now, now you can be in person. I think it's just so much better. And I encourage every reporter on our staff to get out there and meet with people as much as they can, because it's how they're going to grow their networks and their career.
And are they open to doing that?
Oh yeah, No, they are. They really are. Yeah, they definitely are. And I think I understand like there's been a lot of kind of, I don't know if it's press or just, hearsay about a lot of the younger generation kind of being a little bit more content with sitting at home or not getting out to meetings. But I think especially if you're a reporter in this industry, which is really competitive at times, you have to get out there and you have to establish your sources. So um,
I mean, if a source has one person who they know and another networking thing, know, like, and trust, they who are they going to go to?
exactly, exactly. And even now, I've been doing this for a really long time. But if there's somebody I would know, I don't know that I want to know, I can reach out to one of my sources to say, hey, could you put a good word in, tell them that I'm trustworthy. I'm not a gotcha journalist or anything like that. So, and that goes so far. Because like we said, it's a relationship industry. So word of mouth, goes a long way.
I'm cultivating a few people who, when they need input on a story,
Mhm.
I will sometimes be a call, and
Excellent.
that's important, and it's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to have you in Commercial Observer at some point soon, Mike. I don't know if you've been in there yet, so we've got to get you in there.
It would be my pleasure.
Let's do it.
So, in terms of social media,
Yes.
are you active there?
I'm active, but I'm not as active as I should be, to be perfectly honest. We have a great social media team. And I think my most active place is LinkedIn. I'm not very good at Twitter and things like that, but I need to be more active for sure. But LinkedIn is one of my favorite places just because I feel it's a professional community. And it's also a great way to network and exchange ideas and what have you. So LinkedIn is currently my place, but I need to expand more for sure.
I have a tip for you. So,
Okay, great.
I guess about a month and a half, 2 months ago, I had Bob Knackel on as a guest.
Oh yeah, I know Bob.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, he's the guy to know.
Right. Yes.
But I was never really active on Twitter.
Hmm.
But there is a commercial real estate community on Twitter that and you in particular, who you're looking for stories all over the country, you're looking for contacts all over the country. There's a hashtag on Twitter,
Okay.
RTWIT,
Okay.
reach, and it's a compilation of some huge, heavy hitting commercial real estate people from every aspect of the business, from finance to building to brokerage. And Bob Knackel, in a very short period of time, has become like the godfather of the retweet community. But I would 100% recommend just checking it out.
Oh, it definitely will. It doesn't surprise me one bit that Bob Knuckles become the Godfather. That doesn't surprise me one bit.
Well, if you have a Twitter account, you can
Yeah.
send me your Twitter handle and I can introduce you into Retweet, because I'm sure everyone there would love to meet you. They actually just had a thing today. One guy who, I forget his name, but he posted a list of the women of Retweet, because it was a list of about 25 women who are, in his mind, significant in the commercial real estate space.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd
So,
love that. If you wouldn't mind, Mike, that'd be awesome. Thank you. I'd really appreciate that.
no, my pleasure. You know what? Again, it's so the networking group that I run is called BNI. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of it, I think. Yes.
So they have a tagline of "Givers Gain,"
Okay.
and it's really a very common sense tagline, and it's very simplistic. But in reality, like for a guy like me in my industry, my value add is who I can connect, who I can bring value to. That's really what it's all about.
Absolutely. I love that. I bet you're really good at that also. I think it's such an important thing in our industry. And I'm sure you're very popular for that reason in terms of introducing people and helping them to add value.
But yeah, I try.
And how old is the networking group? How long has it been you've been together?
The group I'm in's been around for probably about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
BNI's been around since the '80s.
Right.
Been around forever.
Was your group formed during the pandemic or did it happen to kind of come together through that time?
I live on Long Island,
Right.
and this was a Manhattan group. So
Okay.
on Wednesday mornings, I had a 7 a.m. meeting in Manhattan, and I would have to leave my house at about a quarter to 5.
Oh, wow.
Get
Yeah.
to the meeting on time. And then when COVID hit and it became virtual, it became much easier, but not necessarily better.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Yep.
but if you ever want to, we have in-person meetings once every 4 or 5 weeks. Love to have you.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. All these invitations. Thank you. I'll take you up on every single one of them.
Great. No, that's terrific. That's
I
terrific.
love to meet new people. Like I said, it's one of my favorite things is to meet new people in this industry. So,
I'm in a, well, I don't know if this is the forum, but I'm in a different group that's run by a commercial real estate attorney. And
okay.
he invites anyone who's not a commercial real estate attorney who's in the commercial real estate space.
Mhm.
So you got brokers, title companies, investors, builders. It's actually a great group, and it meets once a month in Manhattan at 8:30 in the morning till around 9:30.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you're interested in that, I'd love to have you come as my guest to that.
Excellent. Yeah, sign me up. That sounds great.
You know what? I'm going to have to rewatch this just to remember all.
All the invitations.
Right, right. So
Cathy said yes to this and this and this and this. Okay.
I'll remember. You know what? I am, although my memory is declining a little bit, but that's a whole nother story. So,
So Mike, quick question for you. So this is a report with me, but how did you transition from the commercial origination space to where you are today, the title space?
so I was a municipal bond analyst when I got out of business school
That's
in
right. Yep.
4, and I focused on housing bonds. So I was very aware of title insurance and what its importance was. Certainly in commercial mortgage origination, title insurance is key. I
Absolutely.
actually opened the business with my wife, and she was in a family business since 1986 of hard money residential construction lending.
Oh, wow. Interesting space. Yeah.
2008 was not kind to that company either. So we were both we we started Hallmark Abstract together in,
Okay. Oh,
in
excellent.
2008, which was not an easy time to start a title company, but we knew the business. We were able to. There was a woman who worked for another title company who was very unhappy, and we brought her in as our chief title officer, and she's still with us today. She's phenomenal. She's
Oh, that's
a
fantastic.
huge key to our success. But you know, we tried a few different things before we opened the title company. It was a very challenging time, to say
Oh,
the least.
yeah, I can imagine. But now you've existed through cycles and you're still here today. So must have been
Still kicking, Kathy. Still kicking.
still kicking and doing great.
So let me ask you a question. What part of the country, and I know my guess,
Yeah.
is your focal point in terms of
So it's New York City. That's where we're headquartered. But honestly, it's been really interesting. I think, especially during the pandemic, we have a few core markets of Commercial Observe. The other ones are LA, South Florida, Miami, and we also have DC. So we've seen capital from both foreign sources and domestic sources really target multiple gateway cities. So it's been really interesting to watch the capital flow over the past few years. But that said, I think our core market is always going to be New York City, but we certainly are expanding more and more. And what I like about the financing side, which is what I mainly cover, is just the variety, because you can see a lot from where the capital is going and why it's going there, and some of the other markets that perhaps lenders haven't lent on in the past, but now they're focused on. Same for investors. So I think variety is a spice of life. So I think it's great to see like some different trends outside of New York City. But I think we're always going to be focused on New York City as our main place.
Right. Well, that would have been my guess, but that brings me to a different point, and my wife always tells me to never talk about politics. But when it
Right.
comes to the commercial real estate space, it seems that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, which I am sometimes, but in the in the scheme of, they call them red cities versus blue cities, and quality of life issues, crime issues, are you do you see that in your experience in finance that is true, that there's more of a capital flow out of certain types of cities, more of a difficulty on the part of lenders to lend in certain environments?
I also don't like to talk politics, but I do think that there's a lot more scrutiny around how cities and especially downtowns are kind of first of all, being kind of overseen and managed, but also just, the political landscape there and how that's impacting downtowns. I mean, I think it's no secret that, San Francisco has been very, very badly hit. And there's a lot of scrutiny there in terms of just, what's going on from the politics standpoint, how that's impacting downtown. Also this, doom loop that we're hearing so much about in terms of the office space. So I think you're not wrong. Unfortunately, I think, there's lenders are being very, very careful of where they lend and what the landscape looks like there, just because they want their properties to do well. And they're just being very, very cautious just now. So it's definitely something that people are looking at very closely, for sure.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, in New York, whether it's 421A, whether it's good cause eviction, whether
Yep.
it's 2019 real estate law that, decimated a lot of landlords, and
Sure.
landlords for the most part are small people, not the big people that, that the politicians are trying to say, you're bad, we're not going to let you whatever. But, you
Right.
know, it's devastational for so many people.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you mentioned 421A, and I think that's, something that has been reported about a lot, but even probably not enough. I think that's caused so much problems in New York City. We heard recently about a building Upper West Side. It's a beautiful building that I think is now in special servicing in CMBS, which means there's a big problem with the loan there. And it's because of the not renewing. So 421A has gone away. So now there's a problem there, from that perspective. So I think that's something that probably, we as real estate publications probably have to even write more about, because it's such a major, major impact in New York City.
Agreed. And, in New York City and many other cities, there's the issue of affordable housing.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And
Another
if,
major.
well, and if builders don't want to build without the 421A,
Right.
it's a supply and demand issue. If you're cutting off the supply, then, you end up with what we've got now, which is, I don't know, the statistic of how many thousands of warehoused apartments there are.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. No, definitely. I think, the affordable housing stock is so critical, not just for New York, but for, the whole country. And I think without an incentive to build, it's really, really tough. And it's really worrying, because you think about how unaffordable so many cities are at the moment. And if it gets worse, that's pretty terrifying for a lot of people who just won't be able to afford to live there anymore. So
100%.
pretty bad. Yeah.
A
No, it's not
100%.
good.
So
No.
that's somewhat of a sad note. I don't want to end on a sad
Oh, definitely. No, we can't end there. Come on.
note. No, no, no. So talk for a quick second about your podcast.
Oh, so we started a podcast actually not too long ago at Commercial Observer, something we planned on doing for a while now, but it's called Backstory. And so we're going to be focused on the backstory, either for a transaction that means a lot for the real estate community, commercial real estate community, I should say, or somebody else's backstory in terms of their personal story. So we've already spoken with a few different people, economist at Moody's. We also spoke with a lender recently, just to try and get these people's their firsthand experience and perspective on what's happening in the market today. Because I think there's so many different pieces, to what's happening, and so many different opinions and just viewpoints. So that's what we try and do as a publication anyway, just try and gather as many different perspectives as possible. So these podcasts are great for that. Just one-on-one time like this with you. So we have to get you in there too.
You know what? The one-on-one thing is great.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if by backstory you also mean like people who, they've come from nowhere and they've achieved incredible success or overcome incredible obstacles. I mean, I think that's
Absolutely. Yeah,
great.
and honestly, Mike, when I'm doing some of my long form interviews, there's so often a story there that nobody else has told. I think a lot of people in real estate, as you know, are very scrappy, but I think a lot of them also come from places that you perhaps didn't know. Maybe they had a challenging time before in their lives, and now they're doing great things today. But I think that's where the magic is in terms of hearing those stories, and then it kind of makes you view differently in terms of their properties, their portfolio, what they're doing in the industry. It makes a lot of sense in terms of why they're so successful, because they've always had that drive to change their life, or to be better, or to do the right thing. So for me, it's a real pleasure to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. I got to tell you, this discussion we had was a real pleasure for me. This was great.
Oh, likewise.
That's
Like,
great.
thank
And
you so much for having me on. It's such a pleasure.
oh, pleasure is all mine. But I look forward to maybe sometime down the road speaking again and definitely, I love, when I was growing up, I used to love going to the racetrack.
Yeah.
Not for charity, but to kind of give them my money. But I would love to, if it's at Belmont next year, I would love to come to the MS event.
You definitely should. It's honestly such a great event, such a great networking opportunity, but just so much fun. And hope you make it to St Andrews too in Scotland. If you do, let me know and I'll give you some tips where to go.
Okay, can you get me? I heard there was a great room at the old hotel. No, the
The Old Course Hotel.
yeah, overlooking the 17th fairway. So I'll talk to you about that.
We can talk about that. I don't know how strong my connections are, but I could definitely try. Maybe my accent will help you a little bit. So
Oh, that's great. And again, thank you, and I look forward to happy networking.
thank you. Thanks so much, Mike. You take care.
All right, you too.
Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.